and Spirit and Truth Sanctuary people. How is everybody doing today? Again, I will mention the fact that Pastor DE is here on the premises, but he is in his office in an online class, and he will be joining us at the end. So I wanted to take a few minutes this morning and just try to do some stuff to stay connected. I know it's a little bit different because we're no longer meeting in the same space, but we like to keep up with people and what's going on. I know that Miss Rosaline Cooper has been having a little issue with pneumonia, and she is having a procedure in the morning, so our prayers and our thoughts are with her. We love you, Miss Rosaline, if you're watching, and all of your wonderful family who we understand from Pastor Brandy, who spoke with you yesterday, that they are taking very, very good care of you. Also, Miss Elaine Jeffries, I believe, had put a comment either last Tuesday or Wednesday night that I noticed that she was feeling a little bit under the weather, and people were saying get well soon. So we're also keeping Miss Elaine, one of our favorites around here, in our thoughts and prayers, as well as Miss Cynthia Spears, who is part of our worship team and has been here forever and ever. Her mother passed away recently, so we certainly are sending all of our love to Cynthia and her family. I also want to read a card that we got from one of our followers who lives all the way out in California. Her name is Miss Cheryl, and we were debating whether or not she pronounces her last name Katie or Caddy. It's C-A-D-Y. But regardless, Miss Cheryl sent us a beautiful, beautiful card, and I just want to read it because we love getting encouragement like this. She said, "Dear Pastors D.E. Brandy and LaDonna, Happy New Year to you all. Thank you for bringing so much love, wisdom, and upliftment on Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of each week. Because of the time difference, I usually view the day after rather than live. I'm so impressed with the depth and relevancy of all that you are sharing. Congrats to DE on your master's program. I love how the new revelations are working their way into your teachings. And the Power of Now has been such a powerful course of study for everyone. Pastor LaDonna, I'm a big Amanda Ellis fan, so thank you for weaving her into some of your material. Love to you all, Cheryl." So thank you so much, Miss Cheryl, if you're watching, for sending us that note. And if you guys want to send us notes, we would be just happy to get them. It's coming up on almost a year that we have not been meeting regularly in each other's presence, so it is more important than ever that we stay connected by other means. Let's start this morning with our morning blessing. Spirit of Truth, we thank you for this new day in which we are filled with gratitude. We are grateful for another day to live out our lives in freedom, in happiness, and in joy. We give thanks to you for both the tangible and intangible daily bread that you provide for us. We live and move and have our being in the perfect unconditional love that lives in our heart. We are grateful now for that which we have already received and are grateful in advance for more than we can ask or think coming into our lives on a daily basis. We commit ourselves today and every day this year to get happy and see what happens. In the name and nature of the Christ, amen, and so it is. Okay, our quotes. First, from Adam Gopnik. What drives innovation is abundance and ease, not the pressure of scarcity. Okay, so that's interesting. It's like he's saying what drives us to invent or innovate new things is not that we're under pressure from this, we don't have it, we got to have it, but the ease that comes from an abundance mentality. That's a good one. Okay, the next one, a meditative mind is at ease because it's not trying to acquire anything. Adyashanti said that. Next, no thought, no concept, no identity, no personality, no religion, no country, no I, me, myself, no mine, no goal, no time, no search, no conflict. Right here, right now, I am the nameless, undivided, unlimited, untouched source of life in which bodies come and go like waves in the ocean. That was beautiful. Himanshu Sharma said that. And lastly, by Dr. Jacinta, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce this last name, Mpalyenkana. She says, I am before during and after all conditions. I am a constant that is never altered by the temporal. I am. Okay, so yesterday morning I watched a documentary, one of several that exist, that features the spiritual teacher Ram Dass. And the title of this one that I watched was Becoming Nobody. And it was fantastic. I'm going to quote quite a bit from it today because we're going to be talking about the ease of living in the I am as opposed to the effort of trying to become somebody. And as you probably already guessed from the title of the documentary I just mentioned, it contains a paradox. The way you actually become somebody is by becoming nobody, or by emptying yourself of your ego and instead taking on that presence that goes by a lot of different names: the Christ mind, the Christ consciousness, or simply the I am. There's a whole lot of effort and hard work involved in achieving the status known as being somebody, a somebody. But there is nothing but ease when you surrender to the I am that is already inside you, just waiting to be uncovered. It's not necessarily easy to do this, but once you do, your life will be markedly easier than it would be were you continuing to try to let your ego call the shots. So you guys know me and my little signs that I always looked for. I had watched 20 or 30 minutes of this documentary yesterday morning, and the whole thing was about an hour and a half when my alarm on my phone went off because it was 11:21, and I'm still doing my daily meditations at 11:21 and 5:21. I will admit I have dropped that 7:21 a.m. one, but I am still doing the 11:21 and 5:21. So I took a break and I did my meditation, as I sometimes do, and I lit an incense stick. And so I was just watching it for the first few minutes. You know, I do that sometimes, just watching the smoke to kind of clear your head before you close your eyes. And I noticed how easily the smoke from the incense stick was just rising, just kind of floating up through the air. There was no effort on its part at all. It would just, go to a certain level and kind of hang out there for a second and then go on up until it just dissipated. And so I took that as my little sign that I was on the right track, and that's what I was supposed to talk about today, was the ease of living in the I am. It's just kind of like that smoke of the incense. You don't have to, that smoke's not trying to get up higher. It just lets itself be lifted. We're going to jump right in now to the material from the documentary I've been talking about, Becoming Nobody. And for those of you who don't know who Ram Dass is, he's passed on now. I think he passed on in 2019. But he was a spiritual teacher, psychologist, and author. His best-known book is called Be Here Now, written in 1971. And it helped popularize Eastern spirituality and yoga here in the West. But before he went into that line of, the spirituality, he had been a psychologist, and a professor at Harvard University, where he was well known for his experimentation with LSD and other psychedelic drugs as it related to the mind and to psychology and spirituality. So his birth name was Richard Alpert, but he was given the name Ram Dass, which means servant of God, by his Indian guru Bhagwan Das Maharaji in 1967. We'll get into all that later. The documentary begins with him saying this: "For 25 years, I had been huffing and puffing and trying to become enlightened as hard as I could. I had fasted and prayed. I had mantraed and pilgrimaged. I had sat before my guru, done all-night thises and thats, and meditated for endless hours. I had really put my time in, so to speak. And then I ran into one of my old colleagues from Harvard, and after a few minutes he said, 'You haven't changed a bit.'" So right there at the beginning, we are introduced to his whole premise that he had worked so hard to become a somebody in the spiritual world, only to realize it hadn't gotten him very far, or at least not very far in the eyes of others. And that's where he goes next. Where does this come from? This feeling that we have to work hard for the approval of others, even in a spiritual context. So, as part of the documentary, one of his former students comes back to visit him 20 years after having been in one of his courses. And so he was remembering, the student was remembering, along with Ram Dass, the first time they met. And the young man was telling the story of how after a few days of meditation and contemplation, he finally had gotten his chance to walk up and say a few words to Ram Dass. And that as a result of his time there in the course, he believed he had figured out a very deep truth about himself and why he was there. He believed that the meditation had led him to discover what he had been in search of. So when he stepped up to Ram Dass, he said, pretty proud of himself for being so deep, "I think I've come all this way for you to tell me that I'm a good son." And so then, this is him relaying the story to Ram Dass 20 years later. And then he said, "And you just smiled at me and leaned closer and said, 'Well, are you?'" And so then, of course, they both laughed. But that's so true. The deeper truth, that the really profound thing that young man had learned was not from all of his hours of meditation where he felt like he got to the root of his problem, which in his mind was needing approval from a father figure. That was just the profound truth he thought he had learned. But actually, his greatest learning was from an exchange with Ram Dass that was probably 30 seconds or less, when he went searching for that approval and validation from an outside source. And Ram Dass's reply was to put it right back on him when he asked, "Well, are you?" With just 3 little words, he let and approval had to come from inside him. Helps us to realize and uncover that. That's a deep, profound truth that you won't get through a lot of effort. It's just an aha moment of realization, like when Ram Dass asked that young man a simple question. Okay, so let's continue on now with Ram Dass talking about how we got into this habit of what he calls efforting rather than living in ease. He said, just like astronauts put on the suit that's required for them to go in space, when we are born, we put on the suit, our brain being the steering mechanism or a part of our physical body. Too often, as we've often talked about before, we think of our brain, even in its expanded form as our mind, as who we really are. But here he describes it as a part of the suit that we put on when we come here to have a physical, earthly, human experience. And I love that, because later on he gets to the true difference between our brain or our mind and how it behaves and achieves what it believes it needs to, and the actual I am of who our spirit/soul is. Okay, back to what he's saying about the suit we wear here on earth and how it affects us. He says, and as we learn how to use our earth suit, we get rewarded all along the way. But the problem is that a lot of the time we get so good at navigating life in our earth suit, and we get rewarded so much for what we can achieve with it, that we can no longer differentiate between what is our suit and what is us. Because people are always coming up and complimenting us. "What a nice suit you have." Of course, referring to our accomplishments, what we have achieved. So once that starts happening, you're constantly looking into everyone else's eyes, watching for their reaction to you and listening for their responses of affirmation to you, to be able to tell whether or not the suit you're wearing is really adequate or good enough. It's what I call somebody training, and we all go into it the minute we're born. Your parents know who they are, and their goal is to make you somebody too. My parents were very intent on making me somebody. They wanted me to achieve, be responsible, be healthy, be successful, bring them pride, and they wanted me to be happy as long as it didn't interfere with any of that. So let's just stop for a minute and let that statement sink in. That's so true about many of us. He said, my parents wanted all these things for me. They wanted me to be happy, but they also wanted all these other things, and being happy was kind of last in line behind all of these other things that they wanted from me. The problem that I experienced, though, was that I wasn't comfortable in my suit, or as some say, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. So I was always trying to readjust myself, but everybody else just kept saying to me, what a beautiful suit. That's a really impressive suit you have, because of all my outward accomplishments. And they would always follow that statement with this one, you must be really happy. But I wasn't. Now, if everybody around you who you're looking to in order to be able to tell how good your suit is telling you you're happy or that you should be happy, but you're not because you're not really comfortable in your suit, what do you conclude? I concluded that I must be sick. So I went to see a therapist who taught me how to wear his suit instead of my suit, and I paid him for it. And after I learned how to wear the suit he taught me to wear, even more people said, what a beautiful suit. I wasn't happy in that suit either, but I was somebody because I had achieved the status. And we all do this. We all walk down the street thinking we're somebody because we've accomplished the things that people have told us we must. People have told us we must. And because everyone else is doing this too, we're all reinforcing this particular structure of the universe as we've been taught to see it. But what we're actually doing is entering into this giant conspiracy with each other. When we meet and we say, I'll make believe you are who you think you are if you'll make believe I am who I think I am. And in this way, all of us are very busy being somebody. And so then he goes on into describing the next part of his journey, still trying to become comfortable within himself, because he was smart enough and he had jumped through enough academic hoops through the psychotherapy and an Ivy League education, eventually even becoming a professor at Harvard, to know that that world was not where he was going to find his answers. So at Harvard, he actually began studying the effects of psychedelic drugs on the brain with the famous Timothy Leary. That might be a more familiar name to you. And he claims that the first time he ever did LSD is also the first time he ever felt what he describes as the presence of God. He said he finally reached a place in his mind through the drugs where he did not feel the need to say, I am this or I am that. He could just say, I am, and be okay with it. And he talks about, while he's on these drugs, losing his feeling of separateness from others and losing that lifelong feeling he'd had of not feeling comfortable or being at home in his own skin. And so he continued to experiment with these hallucinogenic and mind-altering drugs on himself and on others for 7 years. Now, this was back during the 1960s when this was not, before it became illegal. But in the end, this is him saying this again, but in the end, reaching that state of I am, where he was, well, no, this is not him saying this. Rewind. This is me. In the end, he realized that reaching that state of I am through the drugs, being comfortable in his own skin, reached its limits, and he felt like he needed to move on because the drugs had done all they could do for him. And he describes it like this. He said, I tried every chemical possibility and combination to try and stabilize that feeling of being happy and truly okay with myself as I was. I thought if I took this drug, then I followed it with this other drug and did it under these specific conditions with this particular person, reading this Tibetan text after fasting for X number of days and standing on my left foot for X number of minutes, then maybe it would last and become a permanent part of my being. But I still came down from the high eventually, no matter what amount or combination I used. And I kept coming down for 7 years. So I started looking for it through another avenue. I remember at one place in the documentary, he actually said, I realized that the point was not to be high or to feel high all the time, but it was to be free. which included being free of having to take drugs or go through some other avenue to feel at home with myself, to feel in this constant state of I am. So then the next part of his journey, he says, I went to India and met a guru named Maharaji, and he was the first being I had ever encountered who never came down. He then became my doorway to God. He was more than a groovy teacher or a wise man who could teach me things. He was a being who had experienced surrender to the degree that he was comfortable being nobody at all. And because of that, he became the perfect mirror for me to look into and learn about myself. I sat at his feet for 7 straight months. Through that experience, I learned that all of life is about just being where you are, being there honestly, as consciously as you know how to be. So we're seeing here the progression of his search for his own internal I am, which was full of a lot of effort and hard work. First, he tried through achieving everything his parents wanted him to, an Ivy League education, which eventually led to a professorship at Harvard, and you can't get much more accomplished than that on the academic level. That didn't do it for him. So then he went through psychotherapy and then became a psychologist himself. That wasn't it. He still wasn't comfortable or happy. Next, he tried psychedelic drugs, which he admitted opened him up more to his own spirituality than anything up to that point had. But after 7 years of trying all sorts of combinations of various chemicals, he realized that at some point, the drugs always wore off, and he came down from the high. So then he went to India and became totally devoted to a guru who fortunately, instead of taking advantage of him, became a mirror for him and pointed him back to himself to find the I am that had been inside him all along. So he ends by talking about the various things people do to try to cope with not feeling comfortable with themselves or with life in general. He goes through his own journey and talks a little bit about all the coping mechanisms he tried, which we've just been through, and then he widens it out to things that are common to everybody's journey. He says a lot of people respond to life's uncertainty and to their own uncertainty and anxiety about themselves with fear. And the way they dissipate their fear is through various strategies and techniques. One strategy is just to buy more stuff, to get more pleasure now because it's all going to be gone soon. That's one technique, the materialist strategy. There's another alternative, which is to feel you can reduce the fear if you align yourself with good as opposed to evil. And if you are part of the elect and one of the good guys, and you push away the bad guys, that somehow you will be protected from the uncertainties of the world. Sounds a lot like what we used to talk about being in covenant, doesn't it? Okay, we all go through these stages. People like this grab onto a belief system which makes them feel that they are in the right, and it reduces some of their anxiety. But in order to hold on to that, they've got to convince themselves that other people are not in the right. They've got to polarize the world into good guys and bad guys. They create a reality of my way is the only way, and if you don't see it my way, you're wrong. So again, that's what we talked about last week. That's basically what religion does. It frames everything in the context of this epic battle between good and evil. And people are doing this because they're scared, they're uncertain, they're not at ease with their own I am. So he then gives the solution. What we've got to get to is having compassion for the stages other people are in. Many of us have been through so many stages of this journey, yet we're all still relative beginners. We have all these phrases we use like we're on our path. And then we feel the need to quantify where we are. We're at the beginning, we're somewhere in the middle, or we're near the end. But how do we really know where we are? We might be one breath away from enlightenment, or death, or winning the lottery. Who knows? The uncertainty of this life is what's great because it leaves everything wide open. Wow, I love that. He turned that right around, didn't he? He was able to take the uncertainty of life and shift his perspective from one of fear to excitement. He's saying that that quality of life, that not knowing, is what opens life up. The I am, looking at that way, the ego fears being wide open, that everything is possible quality of life. What's that famous quote? Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. Life being wide open with limitless possibility is scary to our ego, but not to our I am. And maybe it's scary because one of those possibilities that exist out there is failure. But why are we so afraid of failure? Failure is just a matter of perspective. I was listening to a guy named Andrew Martin the other day, and he was talking about this in terms of careers and finding your purpose. He said, what I have found is that it is often intention that paves the road to your purpose. Years ago, my intention was to be self-employed. That was it. So my intention was, let me find an area where I can work for myself. And the biggest thing that I learned through my first couple of entrepreneurial ventures was to confirm that, yes, I want to be self-employed. Now, for many people who are not wired to be self-employed, an entrepreneurial venture would also clarify something for them, that self-employment is not the life they want. So they didn't fail, they actually succeeded. They found through their having their own business that they hated every minute of. So what it did for them was to clarify precisely that they were not interested in owning, running, creating, or stewarding their own business. And that is beautiful. That is priceless information that they may not have been able to find any other way. So, failure, as Andrew Martin is saying, is a matter of perspective. Not being afraid to fail or seeing failure from the perspective of just getting more clarity about a particular issue, whether it's your career or anything else, is part of your I am. Your I am doesn't fail. It can't. So let's go back to Ram Dass's story. As he looks back over the course of his life, his journey, he doesn't view any of those stages that he went through as failures. You can tell that by listening to him talk. He just views them as steps along the path to finding his own I am. The education, the degrees, the therapy, the drugs, the guru, the meditation, they all served their purpose, and they all led him right back to what had been inside him all along. The I am is a natural part of us, and we try so hard sometimes to find it through some of these external techniques and through a lot of effort. But we really have to get to that place of ease, to be comfortable in our own skin. All we have to do that is just relax and surrender. So Marianne Williamson talks about this process, and I'm going to end today with what she says about it. This is from a piece of hers called How to Place Your Future in the Hands of God. And it's a lecture she did on a series of lectures from A Course in Miracles. She said, according to the teachings in A Course in Miracles, a miracle happens in what is referred to as the holy instant. God's time, or eternity, intersects man's linear time at only one place, the present moment. Our concept of the past and of the future do not exist in the realm of God's eternal time. When we think in these terms, then the idea of living happily ever after is not nonsense, because it means being lifted out of our version of linear time and into the eternal now of God. Happily ever after means you have a holy instant, followed by another holy instant, followed by another, and so on and so forth. The ego is the part of the mind that does not want us to stay in this state of perpetual holy instance, because it cannot survive there. The ego is completely a creature of our past and of our future. Or, as Ram Dass described it earlier, our ego is that part of us that is invested in the somebody training. What we have achieved in the past and what we hope to achieve in the future, which makes us the somebody that we are. Back to Marianne. A holy moment or a holy instant is egoless because it happens when we recognize our I amness. And where I am, my ego cannot be. It must be one or the other. We are either operating in our ego state or in our I am state. The ego never wants us to surrender to our I am nature because it knows that that is its death. Therefore, its job is to keep us focusing on either the past or the future all of the time instead of being present in the moment, which is all of what we're talking about with Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. The ego enters every moment seeking to compensate for what it judges to have been lacking in the past. Its core belief is rooted in lack, and therefore it can't project or manifest anything into the future except lack. When you're being led by your ego instead of your I am, you are missing the present moment where miracles occur naturally. That's another principle of A Course in Miracles, that the nature of the universe is that miracles occur naturally, and when they do not occur, something has gone wrong. And the only thing that can go wrong is our thinking, our thought process. Miracles occur naturally in the presence of love. So when we bring anything from the past into the present, except to love it or to forgive it, we are blocking ourselves off from miracles that would otherwise naturally occur. Okay, time out. I want to stop right here because I already know that some of you are questioning what she said just there. Miracles occur naturally? That doesn't sound right. Miracles are rare. That's why they're called miracles, right? Well, not necessarily. What she's saying is, which is what it also says in A Course in Miracles, is that the universe, as it unfolds, is itself miraculous. And it is. Just think of all the beautiful wonders in the natural world that we pretty much take for granted. The orbits of the planets around the sun, the process of photosynthesis that causes the plants we eat to grow and that give us our oxygen, gravity that keeps us anchored to the earth instead of floating away in outer space, the ocean and how its tides are so regular, our complex human bodies themselves. And we didn't have anything to do with those things being created, nor do we have anything to do in order for those things to continue in their perpetual process. God does all of that all by himself. Sometimes we feel we have to help him out, but we really don't. It's the ego that makes us believe we have to help him out or that we have to help that process out. I want to read now, in that vein, just a short little excerpt from a teaching I did several years ago about trusting the process that illustrates this. I said, as any woman who's ever been pregnant can tell you, there's a whole lot going on inside her body during the 9 months of gestation. However, I have never known any pregnant woman, including myself, who woke up every morning of her pregnancy and said, okay, today is the day I have to create my baby's lungs. Let me sit here at the kitchen table and concentrate on manifesting these lungs. And tomorrow, I'm going to make the heart. And then the next Tuesday, I've got to make sure the liver and the pancreas are in the right place. No, we don't have to do that, thank God. There is a process that takes place inside us all on its own. And all we have to do is let it happen. Our only job at that point is to take care of ourselves. The process itself that has already been set into motion takes care of the specifics. All right, so I wanted to read that because I remembered that I had said that, and I wanted to say it the way I said it because that's the truth. You know, we think we have to help God out to do all, we have to, I got to be somebody. No, God already made you somebody. You just have to surrender to him and let your somebody, your I amness, come through. The process of birth, beginning with forming the baby inside the mother's womb, is a naturally occurring miracle that our ego self has nothing to do with. Now let's listen to Marianne Williamson as she contrasts how our ego behaves concerning the miracle of our lives and how we behave, and contrasting that with how we behave when we are connected to and living from our I am. She says there is some natural intelligence out there that knew how to form a baby from an embryo. There is some natural form of intelligence that can make an oak from an acorn. So if I am of that natural intelligence, why would it be any different with my life? Clearly, that natural intelligence is intentional in taking all things to their next best place, including me. So why would I not trust that same universal source when it comes to my life? In other words, why would I trust my ego rather than my I am? The difference between me and the acorn is that I have the ability to say, no, I think I'll just plan this for myself, thank you. The acorn has no free will, but I do. And I can either use that free will to say, universal intelligence, please flow through me and take me to my next best place. Or, no thank you, I know a better way than God. Surrender means I am willing, with my free will, for God's will to be done through me, which is the same thing as saying, Holy Spirit, I invite you in. Please order my thinking, because when left to my own devices, my ego takes over and things don't go so well. The ego pretends to be a way to order your life, but it can never do so. By surrendering to your I am, you are placing your life and your future in the hands of God and asking the Holy Spirit, that entity which we cannot possibly on an intellectual level understand how it operates, to come into your thought process and to correct any faulty thinking. And by doing this, you achieve the outcome that is the highest and best for yourself and others. Okay, so as you all know, one of my very favorite movies ever is that old 80s movie, Say Anything, with one of my very favorite actors, John Cusack. And so there's a scene in that movie where he's sitting around with a bunch of his friends who are girls, and he's trying to work up the courage to ask this girl out. And so these girls his friends are making suggestions of do this or do that, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she says, why? He says, because I'm a guy, and guys don't do that. And so she leans forward, and it's a hilarious movie because they're all teenagers, and you know how seriously teenagers take romantic relationships. But she leans forward, but this is one of the best lines of the whole movie. So when he says that, she leans forward and she says, don't be a guy, be a man. So I'll say to you, don't be just a somebody. Be your I am. And remember, as I said Sunday, it's not a vertical climb. So many times we think of the I am as some spiritual high place up here that we have to climb to. And that's why we miss it, because the I am is right here in the middle. And then as you realize your I am, it flows out this way. This is the way you expand spiritually, not this way. So nobody, the main point is, nobody and nothing else has anything to do with your spiritual growth. What they say and what they think doesn't matter. You've got to get good with you. That's your I am. And that in itself brings ease into your life. So, the effort of being somebody or surrendering your ego, becoming nobody, and resting in the ease of I am. Which one are we going to choose? I know which one I'm going to choose. Amen?
Good morning, everybody. When I got up from my seat, I made a little sound. And that's right, it reminded me, if you guys have seen the Progressive commercials, where there's a teacher, a life coach, trying to teach people how not to become their parents. And so they're amazing commercials. If you need some joy today, go watch those commercials. And so one of the things he's teaching is that when you sit down, as you get older, not to always go, or standing up. And so I just totally just did it, and I'd only been sitting there for maybe 10 minutes or so. But we're glad you joined with us today, and I caught some of the beautiful teaching about being able to live in the present, not in the future or the past, but being fully present. I have a little bit of love to share with everybody, some shouts out today. from Patricia Shepard, Pastor Don, Sheila Smith, Sheila Warner, Emma, Ann Callie Gosier, Doreen Panton, Pastor Fred and Mary Hayes, Miss Cheryl, Katie. Did you read the? Oh, wonderful! I'm so glad. Terry Johnson, Kevin Broadhead, Terry Salcedo, Bobby Moore Howard, Charles Knowles, Doreen Panton, Alita Brown, Pastor Gloria Harris, Dolores Carroll, Lenora Davidson, Megan Lynch, Miss Megan, Laverne Bryant, Richard Copeland, Kessa Walker Heron, Elaine Jeffries, Ben and Vicki Mullins, Rosaline Cooper, and just a special note, Rosaline responded to LaDonna's comments earlier. And Rosaline Cooper, LaDonna, thanks for all your prayers and vibrations. I feel and receive them. And so she sent you peace, love, and happiness. We love you, Miss Rosaline, knowing that that God is working in through and as your body, as your embodiment right now. We love everybody. Have a great week. Have some joy. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit sunny today or a little warmer. Get out, walk around. I know some of us get cabin fever, and it's a lot more safe to be outdoors at times than indoors. And so get out and get some fresh air. And if somebody walks too close to you, say, I'm not here for social reasons. Get on somewhere, sucker. But we look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And then also tomorrow night, 7 p.m., The Power of Now. Go in peace, and may God bless you.